So you must forgive me that I have been an extinguished professor almost, and nearly extinguished director. So I would hope that you will forgive me for trying to catch up with some of the stuff that I did. But right now, this evening, I'm going to take you away from the cerebral engagement that you've had to another space where most entrepreneurs, most business leaders often don't really voluntarily go to. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of a brief on the work that actually prompts this presentation. This work started with my conversation with a person who is probably familiar, business school students will be familiar with his name. His name is Nitin Noria. He's the Dean of the Harvard Business School. So I was trying to persuade him to do some work with me on Gandhi's contribution to Indian leadership. And I said, Gandhi is such a great icon, but business world hasn't really tapped into the extraordinary wealth of Gandhian ideas. And he said, no, Gandhi is not the role model for business leaders, Krishna is. I said, that's strange. That's fairly strange. He said, you ask the top 100 wealth creators of India and ask them who do they swear by in the morning. I said, that's a very interesting take. I was not much into studying the Gita because I couldn't comprehend the archaic nature of the language. But when I went in and looked at those 700 verses, I came out with something that struck me as extraordinary. And what you're going to hear this evening is a gleaning, a little bit of a crystallization of some of that in as brief a manner as possible. So look at this whole space here. Look at the competitive world that existed a few thousand years back. And you can see two armies in battle formation, and in the middle of this there is a conversation going on in terms of performance breakdown. Here's a guy who has had a serious performance breakdown. He has capability of heroic proportions, but he can't lift his bow and arrow. In the middle of a performance field, he is looking for solace, but he doesn't get solace. He gets a very, Amartya Sen called this a rather long conversation. I don't think he's read the Gita properly, otherwise he wouldn't say this. But I would say 700 verses of extraordinary insight into performance management. So if I look at the Gita from the point of view of a high performer, which most of you are, if you're sitting here, if you've come this far to this extraordinary school, the confluence of ISB and TiE, such an extraordinary confluence of two great organizations, you must be quite a high performer, otherwise you won't get in here. But the fact is that most of high performance is stressed to things which does not produce high performance, unfortunately. Now I'm trying to say that high performance is a function of clarity. It's not a function of the performer. High performance comes from great clarity. And if you want an example of this, just look at a guy who is called into a desert to sort out a car that's not starting. The car has got, you're in startups, this car is not starting up. And he says that, there's a problem with the engine, let me look. And he looks at it for about, 30 odd minutes, and then he comes with a little hammer and strikes a part of the engine, and the engine starts up and it comes to life. And the guy whose car this was feels very grateful. He gushes in gratitude and he says, so how much is that? He says, $1,000. He said, $1,000 for one stroke of the little hammer? He said, no, $1 for the stroke and $9.99 for the clarity. And if you didn't have that, I wonder how you would perform. So if I look at performance as founded on clarity, I would point out to your shirt and say, if you get the first button wrong, what happens to the rest of the buttoning? I think when you go out in the work field, see one of the aspects of Indian, corporate life, well, can that music come to a halt? Because I like other kinds. This one is slightly distracting. If you could just bear with me until the dinner comes, you can switch off your phones a little bit. So it does matter that you look for clarity in the middle of a battlefield. It's not a sermon on the mount. It's a sermon in the middle of a crisis that has hit you right there. And you're wondering, what kind of clarity is this? From where does it come? So if you say that, I'm sort of not into scriptures really, but this is not scriptural, this is something else. So I'm going to take you to the next frame. And I'm connecting these two words. This is the name of the work, but fundamentally what I'm saying is that there is something which is timeless, and there is something which is leadership, and they can coexist. Very often, I often hear leadership is, and the great gurus of the world, you look at Harvard, Wharton, MIT, ISB, IIM, it is very clear that leadership is a very contextual process. Okay, people often give the examples of leaders in multiple contexts, and you have to be context sensitive. I agree with that, but I also do not agree with the fact that there are no fundamentals behind there are no universals behind the context. Look at, for instance, tulip gardens in Holland. The flowers are organized very linearly. Look at a Japanese garden. It's a very non-linear organization, unlike the tulip gardens. But if you look at what is the underlying these two different organization of flowers, you would see that the underlying values are symmetry, beauty, harmony, which is timeless. I don't care whether you're talking about a Japanese garden or a tulip garden in Holland, but I do care if there is symmetry, there is harmony. Okay? Now that symmetry, that harmony is critical to clarity, and I'm saying that it is possible that in our engagement in the business world we miss a very vital point. The vital point is that none of us grow money, although we say we grow this business. I think that's a misnomer. We don't grow businesses. We grow people who grow businesses. If you are in the leadership role, if you heard a presentation this morning, it was scintillating. This is the best thing I heard in a long time. And the person standing up here, Taxi for sure, if I remember the name of the organization, and I was quite moved by what he had to say. He said, well, I grew a business, all right, but I realized, and realization came much later, that I grew people who grew the business, and I have to be responsible to the ultimate productive capacity of this business. And growing these people meant my business grew. And if I forgot business, if I accepted business out of the people that grew them, then I'm doing disservice to business as well. Are we together this evening? So what we are saying here is, why should somebody follow you beyond the limits of privileges, powers and positions which are time bound? Why should somebody follow you beyond your temporal value? If you look at some of the icons of leadership that has survived 100 years or more, you'll find the same things over and over again. It has nothing to do with probably the one text called the Gita, but it has got everything to do with that kind of leadership which makes it possible for followers to follow. Without a follower, you can't be a leader, right? And why would a follower follow you beyond a certain point in time? If he follows you for the money you give him, this is a transaction. That's not leadership, that's dealership. I think there's a difference between the two. Okay? Now you deal, but once that is gone, what makes a follower still follow you? And then you will come back to something very fundamental about human nature, about the human mind, about human constitution. For instance, if I talk about the element of timelessness that exists in this room, right now in this room, everything is function of time, in terms of everything will go in time. The chair you're sitting on, the floor you're on, your body. In this kind of schools, people say life of the mind, even thus that life of the mind has a shelf life, which is not timeless. Everything goes, but what does not go is this knowledge, this awareness that everything goes. The ability to observe the temporality of everything. That businesses grow, they have a mortality, they die, they pass away, they are reborn in another form and shape. This whole nature, the whole cycle, you call it business cycle, the whole cycle of life almost goes through you, and you recognize that you are an extraordinary and impassioned observer of that cycle. And if you look at real leaders, great leaders, and I'll give you some examples, they seem to be able to see the entirety of it, the whole of it. It's like something like this white screen, and you can project an extraordinary movie on the screen. The movie can have a lot of bloodshed, a lot of violence, a lot of romance. And then all of a sudden, as the movie is over, you look at the blank screen, the screen is not changed a wee bit. All right? You might think, what is the screen? The screen is the clarity on which the entire drama of events are played out. That clarity has not waned a wee bit. Nothing has happened to that clarity. But without that clarity, there is no drama. So if business is built on that space of clarity, what would be the elements, those elements of clarity? And this is what the Gita, this is what Arjuna and Krishna, and this is, I'm going to end with only these three elements so that you recall that as you go out for dinner. And I'll have only 8 slides, so we are on the 3rd, so be patient. Okay, so if you are looking at these 3 elements, these are like 3 legs of a chair. Anyone, if you dislodge the chair, loses balance. Now if I look at these 3 elements of what it means to grow an enterprise, and I'm making a distinction between growing a business and growing an enterprise. Growing a business means accumulation of resources, money and the rest of it. Growing an enterprise means much more than that. Growing an institution means much more than accumulation of resources. Okay? Where you need people to work together in a sustainable basis, it's very different from growing a business. That's why a lot of entrepreneurs, in fact, I heard this morning somebody said, I didn't know how to grow a culture, I knew how to grow money, make money. Do you see this? The very nature of the successful football team is when a team is in championship form, where any element of the team is able to deliver the performance at the right time, at the right place, in the right context. It doesn't matter who does it, because it's a teamwork. So purpose is different from a pursuit of a singular goal of accumulation of money for myself, or doing it because I have this focal point of ambition to the exclusion of ambition of all others. And if you look at the constant, why organizations have failed, why a Satyam has failed, why an Anderson has failed, you'll see the same story over and over again. Why Indian hockey has failed. You'll see the same story over and over again. That it is the perpetuation of a goal at the cost of purpose. Now, if I look at purpose as integration of goals, the closest example I can see is between the comparison between the heart and the feast. Now, look at the feast and the heart. The feast resembles the heart in your biology book, right? So purpose is not philosophically seen here. I'm locating purpose to your biology so that you know that it has got enough to do with you. It's not an empty speculation, right? So if you look at the feast and you compare this with the heart, and if you ask the feast to mimic the movement of the heart, and the heart 72 times a minute on an average the heart beats. An American Heart Association says that if you live to the age of 68, probably your heart has beaten about 2.6 billion times. Now I am asking the feast to do it for 5 minutes, not 68 years. And 10 minutes and about 1 hour. After that, you will take me to court, ask for compensation. The feast cannot. And the clever answer to this is that the feast is not designed functionally to do what the heart does. Come on, don't you get it? I said, I get that. But functionality follows purpose. Don't you see this? The job of the heart is to integrate its movements with whatever the rest of the body. So its goal is actually intimately connected to the goal of the rest of the body, and its organic capability, is functional capability, is a direct fallout of its larger purpose. So it has the strength, it has the capability of doing what it does, which the feast does not have. Feast is given a goal from the outside. Do something I'm asking you to do, I'll give you a compensation. The heart is able to do it because it can integrate its goal. Not that it doesn't have a goal, it has a goal too. But its goal is integrated with multiple goals, and the result is that it delivers extraordinary high performance, high fidelity performance. So when you're meditating, your heartbeat will go down slightly. When you're running or jogging, it'll go up. So it knows how to navigate, how to calibrate. It's like a musical kind of score, and I look at those printed stuff of your heartbeat. You can now do it on a computer, and you can see it's like such a finely calibrated instrument. And it is on purpose, it is working on purpose. Now transport this to the world of organization, and you will see the same story, that your purpose gives you an energy, a functionality, a capability in your physiology. If I start the day on purpose, my energy level seems to go up significantly. I wonder why. If I look at a spider's web, spider itself, anatomically speaking, is a very primitive kind of organ. But if I look at what the spider weaves, Then I realized the spider has a very deep sense of its ecology, and it can work in tandem with its ecology and produce a web. If I look at a monarch butterfly that starts from those forests and Amazonian forests in Brazil and Mexico, and they go up to North America, their grandchildren go and grandchildren come back, and monarch butterflies, as research is telling us, is they will land on the same tree in South America after many grandchildren. And how does a monarch butterfly really know? It doesn't have navigation skills. It only knows in terms of its ecology. It is ecologically very sensitive. And this is what purpose is all about. So if I look at purpose as integration of goals, and this is what the Gita is telling, Krishna's advice to Arjuna is, for God's sake, don't think of your journey as a war. It's not a fight. You have to integrate your goal with a larger goal. And you're fighting for a purpose, and as long as the purpose is there, you have to do this. If there's no purpose, there's no need for it. The purpose is that, your dharma has been violated, so you have to get going. Whatever the word dharma means, it could mean, it could mean the law of nature, it could mean whatever, the way society should run. One of the aspects of entrepreneurial life is, life is very expensive, so entrepreneurship is needed and innovation is needed, because it is our dharma to give you at a price performance point this product, this service that you can afford. The great story about Indian healthcare and heart is basically we are following the dharma. See, the poorest of the patient has to get a performance of the caliber of the best hospitals. Shankar Netrala is delivering one of the best performances. It's not that they actually short charge you in terms of quality of the operation. They're giving you that at a price performance point that's much lower. You're following dharma. That's the dharma of a medical professional. So if a patient comes to you and cannot afford health care, and you have the margins to give him that health care, not to give him that capability is violation of the dharma of a doctor, because it's the oath that you take in medical school. If you're going to run a racket, obviously it's a violation of that oath. And you have to understand that dharma does not simply mean a religious order, and the only way to understand your connection to dharma is to see purpose as fundamental. So what do I do in the course of a day? I go out with a laundry list of things that I want to do for others without any reference to myself. Now that would be a very interesting list, isn't it? What that list will do to you, and I can tell you from one's own experience of it, it gives you a surge of energy that is unknown. If I'm just following a sort of schedule only for myself. If you have a list of things that you want to do for somebody else, just 4 or 5 things in the course of a day, you will feel the surge, and it is physiologically verifiable. You can see that high. Harvard research calls this helper's high, and you can see that for yourself. So we go to the next one in terms of performance, and I want you to look at this picture. This is a very interesting picture I took from a friend of mine. This is a forest department guy whose job was it to sort of draw the line. He said, that's not my job really. That's really not my job. It was my job. That's not my job. Now if you're in an entrepreneurial role, you can't say that's not my job or that's somebody else's job. And those silos are precisely where potential is diminished in the organizational context. I've often heard Peter Senge from MIT share this note with some of us. So you enter an organization with an IQ of 150, 147, but the collective IQ gets reduced to 90 and 80. Bright individuals enter and they become part of something very average, something that's underperforming. So if I look at performance slightly differently from the conventional notion of what performance means and how performance can be enhanced. So if you look at performance as the art of undoing rather than the art of doing more, then you have to arrive at a different kind of definition. And this is what Krishna is telling Arjuna in that extraordinary conversation. He's saying, well, for God's sake, undo a lot of doing that you've done in your head. So what is he undoing here? He's undoing those patterns of interference. So you see, capital P is potential and small p is your performance. Now your performance never matches your potential because you do not really have clarity about your own potential. That clarity is not there because there are patterns of interferences that you have gathered from multiple layers of ignorance that you have about who you are, what you're supposed to do, what you can do, what you cannot. what organizations thinks you can do, what kind of, I looked at this guys at the Taj Hotel who were killed in 2008 terrorist attack. The interesting thing is that people did something they were not supposed to do. Chefs were going and forming a human shield to protect human beings, their guests, from being killed by terrorists. In the process, they got killed themselves. Telephone operators went back to their operations because they thought it was more important for them to attend to the guests rather than go to safety. The general manager of the hotel lost his 2 kids and his wife, yet went back to lead the rescue. So if you look at what they did, and then they look at their performance appraisal formats, somebody from the Taj group said, from the HR, he was director of HR, he said, many of them, in fact, most of them who died were not rated as highest performers in their rating lists. So they were not conventionally high performers. Why? Why? Because you never measured performance based on potential. You measure performance on what is observable in the formal lens. So if you start thinking that way, then you're doing great disservice to human potential in the organization per se. And that's what Krishna's advice to Arjuna is, for God's sake, come on. You can't run away from this. If you run away from this, what will others who look up to you really say? And do you see, you model performance for a lot of others. Now, if you're in your modeling of performance, you are suboptimal. You're constantly sub-optimizing yourself. You will be sub-optimizing the whole organizational performance, and that's very critical. So what do I do in terms of enhancing of performance? What I do is, I undo. Max Dupree, who was the CEO of Herman Miller, a furniture company, said, when a guy comes to organize chairs in my little office, I give him a supervisor. Now come on, don't tell me, this fellow has brought up 2 kids, he has sent them to school, he knows what to do when their nose is running, or he knows what to take them to hospital. You mean to tell me that he does not know how to organize chairs? And you give him a supervisor to do so? Do you see the enormity of the potential that is lost? You keep a security guard there. The guy looks linearly outside from his post door. He can do so many different things. The kind of destruction of intelligence that we do in formal organizations, just because we don't seem to see potential. What we do is we cover up potential with a lot of interference patterns, untested assumptions about what people are, what they can do. And this is something that you have to test in the crucible of experience. You go out there. When Gandhi started the Salt March, his comrades in Nehru, Patel, all of them said, will this really work? You will walk to break the salt law, you think people will walk with you? Are they crazy? And he said, I also don't know whether they will walk with me. Lekin karke to dekho. Karke to dekho. Hota hai ki nahi hota hai. You the crucible of this. You perform and then you see so many interference patterns in your head, what will work, what will not work. Okay? Now, if I look at undoing as a value, look at large organizations that have undone themselves. Look at the CNN. You watch CNN. They are the ones who started 24/7 news channel. Before them, news was 9 o'clock news. Okay. Now, the moment CNN starts this, everybody else has to follow. They have undone the whole set of assumptions that news has to be temporal. It has to be only time bound. Okay. Just think of Intel. What Intel did. Intel in the 70s, in the business of memory. Now, Intel today. Microchips. What has Intel done is a whole organizational portfolio of what they're really good at. Now, if organizations could not undo a few things, look at Remington Rand typewriters. They could not undo the success of the product. Look at Kodak camera. Okay, and so look at organizations that have failed because they could not undo. They allowed a lot of interference from the past to come in their field of their mind, and this is what we have to do. So what do I clear out? And that clarity is very critical. What do I clear out from my mind? What baggage, what is that excess baggage that I'm carrying? Now if you do a little review of your day, of your work day, just a review, going back on a TV, like a reverse video mode, if you just go back in the course of a day, you see a lot of stuff, a lot of junk that you're carrying as a baggage, a lot of stuff that you said you should not have said, a lot of things that you thought should not have been thought. And if you undo some of that, it will be a fundamental shift in your energy level. and you get closer to your potential. Okay, so why does Arjuna come out of our conversation of 700 verses ready to now take on? What had Krishna done? Did he give him a Ayurvedic medicine? I don't think that was given. No elixir was given. Was he given a massage? No, I don't think he received a massage. What he got is a phenomenal bit of undoing of what he had done wrongly. Proliferated a range of thoughts that had no meaning, no value, no connect with reality. This is the most critical part. So you have a taste of reality, and that reality will take shape in the form of performance. So there is a direct linkage between clarity and high performance. Do you see this? Do you see this? Do you see the need for a conversation such as this just before dinner and the whole day that you had? Do you see the value of it? Not because you had lectures going or you had piles of knowledge, but you had clarity that you never had before. I sat in the morning, I had clarity as to how business can be done from a youngster who can teach me a few things. So I could sit there and take away just one idea and make that idea as my own. That's my clarity I gained from it. Okay, the third one is of course possibility, and I'm going to look at possibility from the framework of shifting the horizon of perception. Now what happens in organizations that you are so caught up in the tangibles? All the conversation that I heard here was largely about tangibles, and rightly so, because that's what people connect with. But if you have to grow a business, if you have to be entrepreneurial, then one formula must necessarily work. The formula is your intangibles must always take precedence over tangibles. Is that conversation over?
Outside.
Going outside, it is happily in a conversation. Okay. So I'm saying, is it possible that intangibles have to take precedence over the tangibles? In the course of the day, if the moment I go there and I count my assets and I say, well, more critical than the tangible aspects of what is visible, what is observable. So is it possible to look at creativity, innovation, to look at ideas? Because our problem in India is whenever there are ideas, we think it is philosophical. Gita must be a post-mortem accessory that I need to give to someone. Gita is for holy cows, it is for RSS or BJP or some other entity, or it is for the Brahmin who knows Sanskrit. I have not seen this. Why would the book survive 2500 years? Why would a parent call his son Arjuna today? I looked at record of 2012 naming of kids of India. Arjuna was number 1 on the list, and I said, why would Arjuna's name still surface? Why would we name our kids as Arjuna? Why would we not investigate that? What would Arjuna represent? Okay, why would I wish that my son was one like that? These are research questions, right? And I'm going to end with because I don't want to really, you must be hungry and angry with me as well. So I'm looking at two world of two possibilities. One from a traditional industry and one from a new age industry, so that you go back. You go back fairly convinced that by mistake I had. Okay. You go back convinced that it actually works. Now the first aspect is a person whose name is J.R.D. Tata. Some of you of the new generation may or may not connect with him, but a lot of old generation business people know who J.R.D. Tata is. He is the one who created the Tata empire as we know it. And Ratan Tata, of course, made it global. Now, interesting thing about J.R.D., he was in Jamshedpur, and while he was walking with his HR manager, he saw a bunch of people shouting slogans. In those days, in the 60s, 70s, shouting slogans was a way of life. So J.R.D. asked his HR head, why are they shouting? He said, sir, they're just upset. And because you're here, they want to demonstrate, because they want to leverage on your visit. So he says, okay, if they're shouting, why are they shouting? He said, this is unjust, unfair, and most of the demands have been met, but this is just a ritual that they have to engage in each time a CEO comes. He said, no, I'm not worried about what they're shouting for, but I'm worried about where are they when they're shouting? They are under this hot sun of Jamshedpur, and they don't have drinking water anywhere nearby, so can you give them a shade under which they can shout? And can you give them some nimbu pani? Can you give them some nimbu pani? All right. And the HR head said, Yes, sure. And 50 years later, you say 50 years down the line, there were no strikes in that plant, 50 years thereafter. See, this is an old age example. I'll give you a new age example, and then I'll take a few questions if you have questions, otherwise together we'll enjoy our dinner, all right? The next one is from D-Hawk, and the person created what you use today on your card. It's called Visa, He created Visa. So I had a conversation with D-Hawk, and this conversation was about what he did. It was a 10 minutes conversation on the telephone. So I asked him, how would you like to be? He was a great wealth creator. He transformed personal banking industry as we knew it. So I asked him a question. So how would you like to be remembered as a good grandfather? What is your opinion about personal banking industry of today? He says, I don't care. I said, okay, tell me, what did you do when you created Visa? He said, I just redefined money. I said, how? He said, I redefined money as human energy impulse that can be alphanumerically coded on a plastic card. And those impulses could be transmitted from one continent to another, provided there are two things behind the transmission process. One is value, the other is trust. Any institution that has these two dimensions can potentially be called a bank. Imagine the wealth of the definition. Imagine the clarity that he has about money. You think you grow money? I haven't seen any tree that is growing money. I don't see a money tree anywhere. Okay? But he says money is human energy impulse alphanumerically codable on a plastic card. I said, that's a phenomenal knowledge. How do you convert this knowledge into something simple that can be used by a grocer in India or somebody who's a farmer in California? He said, I created a business card which is as simple as this. You can be an ordinary filler or Rockefeller, doesn't matter. You just go and punch and the card will give you money if there is trust and value in that transaction. So I said, see, look at the complexity, look at the clarity of knowledge, and look at the simplicity of execution. This is what makes entrepreneurs who they are. Clarity and simplicity. Clarity in knowledge, in cognition, simplicity in execution. But there's another dimension to your building a business. So I asked him, you have to talk to 130 odd banks to make Visa meaningfully possible. Because if the banks don't agree, Visa has no chance. So what was the way that you negotiated with bank CEOs? They were very mighty people in your time. He said, I had a mantra. I said, that's an Indian word. What does the word mantra mean to you? He said, anything that works is a mantra. I said, tell me, what was your mantra? He said, anytime I met a person who's inferior to me in rank and hierarchy or talent, my mantra for him or her would be, you are as great to yourself as I am to myself, therefore we are equal. Then he said, there was another part of the mantra. The other part was, each time I met a person who's superior to me in rank, hierarchy and talent, my mantra for him or her would be, I am as great to myself as you are to yourself, therefore we are equal. And I said, did it always work? He said, no, but it never failed to help. I said, why? It never failed to help. He said, because my communication was direct. It was based on truth. It was not based on who you are. Like an ATM machine. ATM machine is not looking at your face and cringing if you don't wear good clothes. Okay, that's what he did. He democratized the transaction. I said, that's a phenomenal wealth of knowledge. Here is extraordinary knowledge. Here is simplicity of execution. And here is this deep affection for the human being. Secret recipe for entrepreneurship. And I said, well, before I conclude, I want to do a namaste to you, the Indian namaste you must have heard about. Yeah, I've heard, that's your national greeting. I said, it is slightly more than that greeting. He said, tell me what? I said, you have to fold your hands, your palms touching each other, fingers pointing up, thumbs pointing towards the heart. And you must make eye contact with the person, unlike the Indian Airlines namaste. Make eye contact with the person who's up front. And then you say, with all my cognition, your head should be bowing down to the gesture and your heart should be in the gesture. And you say, with all the power in my head, my power of cognition, connected with the power of my execution in my hands, connected with the power of affection in my heart, I acknowledge the divine that exists in you and me in equal measure. He was silent at the other end of the phone. I said, if you're a non-believer, if you're an atheist, if you haven't read the Gita, doesn't matter. Replace the word divine with Visa power, the formula remains the same. He says, how come? I said, when the planning system, when the cognitive system of the organization connects with simplicity, elegance of execution, and it connects with a deep affection for each person as as another expression of your own being, then being that, the other does not really matter. Being matters the most. So Gita's lesson from Krishna to Arjuna was, you are just that being, Baba. Whether you want to be this or be that is a secondary operation. But first just be. Figure out that being is a huge thing. That being is that raw material, that creative potential that can be morphed in any dimension that you want it to be. But just be first and foremost. That then is all I had to say for this evening. I will take a few questions. Thank you. Tangible hits your sensory apparatus. You see, like somebody was saying, prove it to me, then I'll believe you. You can't prove it to me that you were born of your own father. You can't prove. You prove. You prove it to me. I can prove through tangible experiences. So it hits me. You know, I see correlation and I know this works. But the world of correlation is very dicey. You know, you have to go to causalities, and causalities are not always tangible. I'll give you an example, and this will actually make it very clear the difference between correlation and causality. George Bush and Dr. Manmohan Singh, both of them are not in office, so I'll not be jailed, so I can mention their names, are in a quiz competition. And the quiz masters ask them a question. The question is, suppose a child is born to your mother, neither your brother nor your sister, what's your relationship to the child? George Bush is finding it difficult to answer. Dr. Singh, smart as he is, says, that's me. And the quiz master says, that's correct, Dr. Singh, you get the prize money. Dr. Bush goes back to United States of America, and he calls his Secretary of State, says, Madam Rice, suppose a child is born to your mother, neither your brother nor your sister, what's your relationship to this child? Madam Rice says, this is a very complex question, I can't figure it out. I have to ask Colin Powell, who's smarter than I am, and come back with an answer. So he goes to Colin Powell and says, Colin, suppose a child is born to your mother, neither your brother nor your sister, what's your relationship to the child? Colin says, Madam Rice, that's me. Madam Rice goes back to George Bush and says, sir, I've found the answer is Colin Powell. And George Bush says, what? I have paid you so much money to come back with the wrong answer of such consultations. Don't you know the right answer is Dr. Manmohan Singh? No, what happens is, he hasn't figured it out yet. You see, this is a problem. You see, most great entrepreneurial activity, innovation happens because you are not caught in correlation. Others saying, dekho yaar, yahan pe kuch hota hai kya? Will Indians, will do this? Now you say, well, Indians are not the Indians that used to think. Will Indians use their, pay as much money for a luxury, this and that? And when they say, when we look at, or 2 rupees sachet of shampoo, people might think this is a crazy idea. See, I was making a presentation to the entire Time Warner, entire leadership team in Hong Kong. I said, look, Fortune magazine sells 50,000 copies in India, and you're jumping up and down. You have no clue about the consumption patterns of newspapers and magazines, because I have commuted in a small town in India, and each time I bought a newspaper, I had to share the sports page with somebody, the entertainment page with somebody else, the weather page with somebody else. So a newspaper was not one single newspaper. But if you think that the Fortune has only, Fortune at that spot where 50,000 people will potentially, you're missing the whole point. Rama Bijapurkar's research was very potent. She talked about Johnson & Johnson. It's the first time even the poorest of family will buy a Johnson & Johnson powder, but the next time they would not. They would expect somebody else to give, because it's an exclusive usage, one-time usage. For subsequent kids, you don't buy it. But if I can make this affordable, if I bring that price performance at the doorstep of the consumer, then I have to go against the evidence of the tangibles. Tangibles are what is, intangibles are what could be if you applied yourself. And that application is very difficult because we are lazy constitutionally. Do you get the point? And so that's exactly the whole issue here. Arjuna is lazy, not that he's incapable. He can't think through the dilemma. Arjuna says, come on, you just think through. And what are you doing here? And why are you doing it? And I clarify some of the fog that is in your mind, and you come back to a resolution, and that resolution is action. That resolution in the mind is action. Between the resolution and action, there is no gap. Do you see this? So mental resolution, clarity is action. Compassion is action. You can't say, I'll be compassionate today and act tomorrow. Gandhi is traveling by a train. One of his shoes falls down on the railway track. The train has begun to move. Gandhi throws the other one on the track. Somebody says, what the hell did you do? He threw the other one as well on the track. He says the poor man who now has a pair will have a pair toward. He doesn't see the poor man, but he sees the possibility of sharing, which is valuable. He creates a decision space. That is what made Gandhi a Gandhi. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a long answer to your short question. That too before dinner. But anyway.